Hi, so my presentation is gonna be about retargeting and like technical stuff about that.
Martina Štammová, and I'll be talking about retargeting animation in Maya using human IK, retargeting to IK and FK controllers. Why is it important to understand your rig before you start retargeting? Euler rotations, gimbal lock and the sorting issues, and quaternion rotations in Blender. So first, let's choose some nice animation that we'll be using as a retargeting source. So first, let's find some cool animation from VFX. Download it without the skin. This is fine. Okay. And once it's downloaded, we just drag and drop into the Maya. So we have the skeleton here, it's animating, and we can create the definition. So under the rigging menu, skeleton, human IK. So let's select the skeleton, and there's actually a human IK template if the bones are named correctly. So it automatically writes this prefix and just loads all the bones. This kind of ones, they'll have the skeleton in T-pose. So we just do this and it's fixed. So we can look it and it's done. We can rename the character to small definition. Okay. And we can reference our character. I'm going to reference it 2 times. And we'll make each of the characters different color. So we have our 2 characters, and we can make the quick definition in human IK for both of them. So let's just create a new character definition. Let's unhide the joints. Can we hide the meshes? And okay, let's call this one red. So this skeleton has a naming of an Unreal Engine skeleton, so I have a preset for that too. It's here, UE template. It automatically fills in the prefix, so I just say OK, and it's done. Let's create another one for the blue. Let's do the same thing. And it's done. So first, let's look at our controllers. We want one character to have IK controllers and the second character FK controllers. So we can kind of tell our rig to do that. So the blue will be FK, which is kind of already there. You can see those FK controllers. And the red will be IK, so we select these, we just switch this attribute, and we can see the controllers are now IK. Okay, let's make sure the both characters are in the same place. And let's create the definition for the controllers. So, red, custom rig mapping, and let's just click this in. Okay. And yeah. So this is what it looks like. So we can kind of like see there are a few differences here. And first of all, like the elbows and knees are kind of working differently, but it kind of looks the same. Okay, let's switch to the animation. To this one. Let's just do it in full speed. The IK controllers have a lot of popping issues. So this is happening because basically we are retargeting from a different skeleton which has different proportions. So IK controllers evaluate the movement by position. But since the proportions are different, the retargeter doesn't quite understand which position is like too much, and it just like pops. The pop starts happening. So this is an issue. When we look at the FK retarget, it looks so much better. No popping, no weird feet sliding on the floor. Everything looks great. So this is because the FK controllers evaluate the movement by the rotation. So it just looks at the angles and it applies the angles. So it is impossible for any popping to happen. But the FK controllers are usually not the best to animate with, and most of the time animator would prefer to have this correct animation on the IK controllers. So what I like to do is to retarget the animation to the FK controllers and then kind of like manually rebake the animation to IK controllers. So I create four locators, constrain them to the FK hands and legs, and then constrain the IKs to them and just bake it. So now we have an accurate retarget and we can start cleaning and animating it. This rig we have on the IK controllers, we have this little switch that kind of controls which body part are the hands and legs following. So like we can follow root or pelvis. So on this rig, everything will follow the root, legs, and it kind of looks like this. So we move pelvis and the IK controllers are not affected by it. But on this rig, we set this to 1, which means if we move this, the hands and legs are also moving. So let's only set this for hands. So we can see the difference. The hands are still IK, but they are following the pelvis now. Okay, let's reset everything. And let's use the animation again. Okay, so let's bake it to our rig. Blue. And now let's compare the curves. So for the translate X, the curves are pretty much the same, just some little differences. But if we look at translate Y, we can see something is happening here. So what is this? So let's look at this part. Right on this curve, it's like almost a straight line. But on this one, it is kind of like this weird thing happening. What will happen if I kind of replicate the straight line and just delete this? So we can see over here, this hand doesn't follow the root. This kind of like side-to-side movement is happening on this controller, but also separately on this controller. So since we deleted the curve, it stays in one place. But this controller is parented under this. So basically, if you want to do the cleanup for this side-to-side movement, you have to do it for pelvis and both of the hands. If we look at the other character, we can see that there is only the animation that we need. If we want to do the cleanup for the main side-to-side movement, we only have to do it for the pelvis, and the hands are just gonna follow. So easy. So it may look like we are ready to make the final retarget, so we can do the final cleanup, but oof. Have you ever experienced this weird behavior when you have set two keys and the interpolation between them don't look natural? This is called gimbal lock. In Maya and most of other 3D softwares, we are using something that's called Euler rotations. Euler rotations represent the orientation using 3 angles. However, they are kind of parented under each other, so their functionality is dependent on the order of the axes. If we click Ctrl-Shift right mouse button, we can choose some rotation options like world, object, and gimbal. So most of the time we work with object or world because it allows us to easily manipulate the object to the axis we want. However, if we choose gimbal, it shows us the real representation of the rotations that are happening. This is a great way to check what's going on if there's something wrong. Here we can see the issue of the axes being parented under each other. If we have an object with rotation order of x, y, z, it means the x is parented under the y and the y is parented under the z. So whenever we rotate z, all other axes are rotating along. If you rotate y, only the x is rotating along. If you rotate x, nothing else is following. So now that we know how this works and what issues it can cause, we can decide which rotation order works the best for our controller in the animation that we are planning to do. So if we plan to make this movement where the controller is rotating around some axis a lot, we can choose rotation order based off of it. If you go to Attribute Editor, you can change the rotation order right here. It's the best to set the rotation order before you start animating. If you already have some animation and change the rotation order afterwards, it will ruin your work. So another Euler rotations related issue that is happening mostly when we're constraining our controllers to object and then bake them. We can see this jump in our rotation keys. Thankfully, there is a function in Maya that fixes this issue for us. You can find it in the graph editor under the curves menu, and it's called Euler filter. You need to do this right after the bake. If you change around the values, even just a bit, it might not fix the issue anymore. So, recently I was working on an animation project in Blender, which I was using for the first time, and of course I've been struggling with the rotation order and the gimbal lock very often. I couldn't get the Euler filter to work, so I started to ask people on the project about it and how should I fix that. So my colleague was like, what if I told you that there's this special workflow that would never give you gimbal lock issues and you would never have to worry about rotations or rotation order? So I was like, huh? So I found out about quaternion rotations. Quaternion rotations represent the orientation using 4 values. So at this point I was like, what? 4 axes? So how does this work? I found out that this is very often used in games and other places and is actually really, really cool. However, it's not intuitive at all. It's already hard enough to think in 3-axis rotations, so it's quite impossible to be able to intuitively use a 4-axis rotations. But if you're one of the animators that mostly look in the viewport while animating, this might work for you very well. However, if you're like me and you mostly use graph editor and rewrite the values manually, quaternions are not for you.